Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. If you've been around these parts for a while, you've seen some exciting things happen. If you come over to Grants Pass, on the streets we've had bears with bear cubs, and we've had totems, well, lots of things. But as I understand, this is the man that's in charge of the whole thrust. Brady Adams, welcome and thank you for what you're doing for our community. You want to name some more?
Yeah, we, along with the bears on the street, we've had crocodiles when we did the crocodile hunt. We've had 7-foot-high nutcrackers.
Oh, had, Christmas this year.
Oh, Christmas was
spectacular.
Beautiful, magical, musical Christmas murals that we had.
Oh, those are so much fun. Those are made here in Southern Oregon.
Mm-hmm. They are. It's amazing the types of resources and the talent and the types of businesses that we have in our own community that sometimes we don't realize.
Now, those just keep happening. I mean, it's like a show. And it's called fiber optics?
Fiber optics, what it is a panel that looks like a giant Christmas card. And what I decided to do is that we would take the traditional Christmas songs like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Here Comes Santa Claus, all of those types of things.
Frosty the Snowman.
And create a light and music show with the fiber optic lights. Panels have a minimum of 10,000 and as many as 20,000 lights. And as the panel does its presentation, the various lights will light up and some will fade out, some will come in.
So this happens over here and then comes this.
Exactly. You'll see Frosty the Snowman melt and then you'll see him come back up. At the same time, we took all the traditional singers of Bing Crosby, Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, and had them use their songs as the records for the panels. And when you come down at Christmas in Grants Pass and walk down the streets, it gives you really, it's not just the physical viewing that you have, it's that emotional feeling, because you can think back when you were watching maybe Bing Crosby and White Christmas or something, and you see the panels and you hear his voice. And
my husband tells me he watched that in the Philippines.
Oh my God.
Sailor Boy. And I watched it at the Redwood Drive-In in July. So I have many happy memories of that. Now the program, this fiber optics, I mean, they're just little lights kind of.
Little tiny lights there. If you open the panels up, there are literally miles of wires, of little fiber optic wires. And each of those wires, it comes back to a color wheel. And the color wheel is the coordinating element that causes the lights to have different types of colors and can change the colors on the lights. And the things that they can do with that are just phenomenal. And again, the amazing thing is that's right here in Grants Pass. It's Hyla Lipson and her operation over on M Street that made all of those panels. We also have one at the Medford Airport.
Oh, wonderful, because that is an art form, but they showed me some other kinds of things they make, just like, a light to this and a direction to that. They make lots of things, but this was so much fun. Leads me right into some more fun things that you've been doing. Why are you so community-minded?
I think it's a combination of things. I think it's my background. I was born and raised here in Oregon. And when I grew up, we went through some pretty tough times. My mother was a single mother, and I was one of 4 sons that she had, the oldest. And unfortunately, our father had a drinking problem, so she had a lot of challenges trying to raise a family because her occupation was she was a waitress. And so there were many times in my life on a personal basis when we needed to have help from others and in order for us just to be able to get clothes on our back or to put food on the table. And I think if you go through that type of experience, it's one that you don't want to have anyone else have to replicate, but you have to realize other people are going to find themselves in those types of situations. So I've always had a strong sense of service to community and have tried to express that in a variety of different ways. Probably the most fun ways are these events that we've been doing, which have been just a joy to be a part of myself.
You mentioned about your childhood, and previously we've done 2 Better Life programs, 2 Journeys and Journals with Brady Adams, and in one of those shows you talked about a narrow escape with Vanport, and people
Yeah.
here in Oregon will remember the terrible flood when the dike gave way,
That gave way.
and destroyed a whole community, second largest community in
I
Oregon.
think it was third largest. I think it was Portland and Eugene and then Vanport at that point in time. But it was larger than Salem. It was larger than Medford.
It was a cracker box town, wasn't
Exactly.
it? Built
That's the
up
best
during the
description.
war for wartime people.
Mm-hmm.
That story left a real impression on me. In fact, a number of things you've done have left a tremendous impact. Well, let's talk about this one.
Okay.
In my album is this program that happened recently, and it's for charity, isn't it?
Yep. It was a fundraiser to raise money for the Three Rivers Hospital project they call the Family House, which is, in a description, it's kind of like a Ronald McDonald House, where if you have a relative or someone who's in the hospital receiving care, and you're visiting them and have a need to stay in the community, but obviously you're going to not want to spend all your resources on doing that, this will provide low-cost residential housing for the family and support groups of people in the hospital and long-term care.
Oh, if you're from Cave Junction and you had a snowstorm or a, you couldn't get in to see your kid or your loved one.
Exactly. And what we did in this particular project was we were able to raise, through the efforts of not just myself, but literally hundreds of other people and volunteers in a variety of different ways through the community, $121,000 to get this project going. And it was a pretty phenomenal success.
Now, $120-some thousand dollars, that is a tremendous contribution towards how much will it cost to build one of these?
It'll be probably in a little bit over $1 million. But what this does is it gives a good momentum of starting on it. It also helps when you can bring that money came not from the bank that I work for, but that came from individual members of our community who reached into their pocket and bought one of these houses where the proceeds went to them. So when the hospital goes for grants for, say, for example, outside the area to the Ford Foundation or something like that, it really helps them in being able to show that there is community support for the project that they've got. And so hopefully that money that we gave to them will obviously help get it started, but it'll be able to be leveraged into bringing even more money in. So.
Oh, let's talk about some of those fantastic. There I am in my favorite. Oh, I tell you, if I could have had that school sitting in my backyard, what a playhouse. It even had school desks, like I sat in,
Yep.
wooden school desks. Mine were rescued from the Riverside fire.
Oh my God.
Because my dad said those are just smoky, and we could buy them for $1 a piece or something. Wow. Because Riverside School was destroyed, but the desks weren't. And I met a man who had been on the cleanup crew for those. Wow. So they had little desks and blackboards and everything in there. How about this one?
The treehouse was another really interesting one. It was. It's a hard one to describe because it was so unique in both its design and the way that they finished it out. But it really had a lot of character to it. It was the largest sized one that we had. It weighed over 6,000 pounds.
Well, and Cece here is Scandinavian Connection, and she really fell in love with that one. This one, Jake, our cameraman today, said that he'd actually utilized this.
Yep, this was a puppet theater, and what it was based on was the story of Pinocchio, and Stromboli, who had the wagon in the Pinocchio story, was the inspiration for this particular one that was put together. And that was an interesting project. When we first started out, what made the project somewhat unique is that it was a combination of builders and artists, but we started with the artist, and the artist drew concepts of what they wanted to do, and then we took those to the builders, and they were the ones that then brought them to life with the advice of the artist. On this one, it started out actually without wheels because we didn't know how we would get a wagon. But once we got it started, the builder had a neighbor who was a professional wagon maker. He saw what we were doing, and he volunteered, came over, and gave all of his time, and we ended up with a real workable wagon, so much so that when we set this project up and set it on the streets of Grants Pass, it was actually brought to the site by a live horse that brought it in. So, I mean, it was just really fun all the way
I
around.
hope you've got pictures of that.
We do have pictures of that.
Because this horse may look live, but He stood there for a long, long time. Lots of people came to see this show.
Oh, tremendous number of people. We had, we literally were open 7 days a week, and we didn't charge anything because we wanted to be accessible to everyone in the community. And the response to it was just phenomenal.
Well, here's Bernie knocking at another door. I'll tell you, it sure needed to come home with me.
Well, that's another, that was one of my favorites. I live in a log house, and as we were going through these projects, I've always had an interest in Native Americans, and specifically the Northwest Coast Indians. And so I thought, you know, wouldn't it be nice if we could put something into this project that was representative of our own geographical area? And so we put together this Northwest Coast Indian house that came with a hand-carved totem pole. And again, as you mentioned, it wasn't just the exterior of the building on the outside, but all of these were finished on the inside with very unique features on each one of them.
For bear rugs, things like that. Things wonderful. Well, there's my husband, Doug. He just had to go see one of those nutcrackers.
That was a fun thing. When I first started the project started as a result of the hospital and the Grants Pass Association of Realtors coming to me asking if we could come up with some idea to help them with this project that they had. And at that particular point in time, I have my wife and I have one grandchild, a grandson. And I had been thinking about I'm not a builder, but I'd been thinking about having a builder build a playhouse for him. And they live down in San Diego, and I was struggling with how I would find somebody down there to do it. And I don't know why, but when they came in, they talked about the family house project, and all of a sudden a light went on my head about my grandson's, the idea of having a playhouse. And I thought, let's build playhouses and do that. But then what happened is once you got into it, it just kind of expanded. And the nutcrackers then were a result of, I had gone down to a place south of San Francisco that makes merry-go-rounds or carousels. I was thinking about maybe there might be a possibility we could do something like that in the community. And as I was looking at it, I saw these giant 7-foot-high nutcrackers. And I talked to the fellow that represented the company and asked him what we could do in order maybe to bring some of those to Grants Pass. And what they had been designed for originally were malls. Oh. But it dawned on me all you had to do was weatherproof them and put an anchor on them, and you could bring them out and put them out on the street. So we had 50 giant nutcrackers on the streets of Grants Pass.
And one of them was given to a lucky person.
We tried it. What we try to do is to create really fun events, and then also have things that make it surprises. And I think that was one of the things that, as this project went along, the ability to be able to offer somebody an opportunity to win that, increased the interest, but also just made it fun. Even if you didn't get one, you could always dream that maybe next year you'll be the one that wins one of these nutcrackers.
Now, you're involved not just in Southern Oregon, I mean, this county. You expand kind of like Better Life TV. Your work is Josephine, Jackson, where else?
Curry, and also Coos County. We've got, we're still we are very committed to being a community bank and a small community bank. We don't try to become a clone of Bank of America, or something. Not that there's anything wrong with those banks or the larger banks. But we try to serve small rural communities. So we're in the Bandons, the Brookings, the Cave Junctions, Grants Pass, Rogue River, those types of communities is where we try to help.
Well, my brother Henry tells me about the time that there was Little Evergreen, and you were there handing out money, or just you started out as a teller, or?
I've been with Evergreen for 32 years. I've been in the banking business for 36 years. I've done just about everything. I've worked in branches. I've worked on the loan side. I've worked on the savings side. My background in education was I graduated from Portland State with a degree in marketing. So I've always been interested in marketing and the ability to be able to do these types of community events. It's just something that brings a lot of joy to me and satisfaction because of my training that I've had, but just also because it just feels like a lot of fun.
And that's why I do what I do.
That's important.
This is like 400 shows that I've done over 6 years. Introducing my friends, people like yourself, to my community, which I love. Because they're such unique and wonderful people here. We were doing one with some Klamath people who were there before it was Klamath Falls.
Oh my gosh.
You know, that the history, some of this, it's really just handed down to grandma, to granddaughter, to whatever, and so soon those are gone.
It is, and one of the things along that line is, as I was looking at next year, or this year now, 2005, we're going to do a Josephine County Heritage Day program. And what we'll be doing is creating an event that'll center around the original pioneers that came to our area. We'll be involving the Applegate Trail Museum up in Sunny Valley. We'll be incorporating the ghost town of Golden just off the freeway and Wolf Creek Inn, and I've got an event, an idea that'll tie that in to this community and also give people an opportunity and a reason to go out and visit these wonderful gems that we have in our that link back to our past right here in Grants Pass.
Well, the Oregon caves are almost the best kept secret. I mean, if someone doesn't rave about it, and the chateau, if I could get someone who was actually part of the building, I know that Gus Lim was part of those big timbers and the huge timbers that held up even when the floodwaters went through the first 2 floors of that building. They held up. With Brady's permission, I've already asked him, and he said, yes, we can talk about it. Because it was at a unique experience when we had this gorgeous wall honoring the Vietnam vets that I saw Brady and I said, I wonder if he's acquainted with the Parkinson's support group. I wonder if I should go up and shake his hand and say, Brady, would you like to meet my friend Mark Axtell? Or Thelma? You want to tell me a little bit about it?
About 2 years ago, or actually about 3 years ago, I noticed on my left hand, I'm left-handed, and I noticed I was having difficulty in writing, and it became increasingly more difficult for me to use my left hand for writing purposes. So I finally got to the point where I decided I would go to a neurologist and did so. And in that process, discovered that I've got Parkinson's disease. So for at least 2 years, maybe 3 years, I've had the disease. It's one of those things that I'm very fortunate at this point in time. The way the symptoms basically express itself is I have a tremor in my left hand. And it started in the left hand and it's now the left arm, but it's one of those things you can't control. I mean, you can do this. So it's part of who I am at this particular point in time, but it's not who I am. It's a part of my life. And I have had some experience with chronic disease before because I am diabetic and I do have to take insulin. So I understand that you do have to treat your illness with seriousness and take the best care of yourself as you can. On the other hand, Parkinson's is a disease that will make its own determination on how it's going to progress. And hopefully the medical science will be able to address some of those things, but at this point in time it is going to progressively get worse. And that's something I don't have the same type of control over as I do about my attitude, and that's what I control. I control my attitude in regards to the disease. So all of us face challenges, whether it's Parkinson's disease or whether it's diabetes or whether it's, there's just, all of us have issues in our lives.
Well, my challenge was when I was 21, pregnant with our son, I had a stroke, and it completely disabled me for a time, and the day later discovered that I couldn't see 1 to 3 on the clock. They were just gone.
Wow.
And I was doing fine with numbers until they asked me to read letters, and that was gone.
Oh my gosh.
And I've regained the letters, but that's one of the reasons I seldom read. I have no prompter here because I'd be a mess trying to read. Yet these things sort of press you into new directions, press me, each one of our viewers, into a direction we'd never have dreamt.
Again, it's one of those things that I have to learn how to live with the symptoms and the things that the disease brings with it. But that's not what my focus on life is. My focus on life are projects like this and other types of activities. I was mentioning that Vietnam Memorial Wall was interesting. I do quite a bit of public speaking. And Parkinson's can be a distraction to your audience. When I had a speech that I gave to the newcomers group here in Grants Pass, and it was one of those where I had a microphone in one hand and a clicker in the other hand. And if I've got that situation, something's going to shake. So I was standing there, I was trying to hold both of them, I couldn't do it, and my hand was going like this, and I said to the audience out there, I said, you know, I am a very friendly person, but I'm not waving to you. I do have Parkinson's, so it comes on there. But you do have to learn to adjust, and you can adjust to those types of situations.
I appreciate that so much. I heard a professor one time, she was a guest, she came to the podium, and she said, to put all of you at ease, I stutter. So don't worry. And from that time on, yes, she stuttered through the next 40 minutes of her lecture.
Yeah.
And you were at ease because she was comfortable with who she was.
Yeah, and that, I think that's a very good description. I'm very comfortable with who I am. I'm comfortable with the challenges that I've got, and that I'll be able to address those, and that they're not going to impact who I am and what I want to do and change my life around the disease. And again, I think it's important to provide assurances to others in that same manner. It's not just about how I go about it, but how I interact with others when I do have those types of challenges. And it's, again, something I don't hide. It's not something anyone needs to be embarrassed about or ashamed of.
Oh, tell me the funny story on camera, though. You're at the Vietnam Memorial.
Well, and I was at the Vietnam Memorial Wall, and I was giving a speech. And
tucked your hands.
I put my hand. What I try to do is not to get the emphasis on the shaking of the hand. So I put my hand behind my back, but it was shaking. It was going like this, and there was this elderly fellow that had sung the national anthem for us, and really nice fellow in his 70s or 80s. And as I finished the speech, he grasped my hand from the back and he said,
"That's all right."
Yeah, he said, "That's all right. You don't have to be nervous." And I've spoken before thousands of people and hundreds of groups or thousands of groups. And he was kind enough to really try to express to me his support for how he felt I was nervous at that particular point in time. So.
Well, that's it.
I never told him that I had Parkinson's disease because I thought it was such a nice gesture that he had. I didn't want to correct him.
I hope he's watching today, and my hat's off to you. Thank you for singing this song, and thank you for being supportive. At that memorial, you had the chapel. Yeah. I will never forget. My friend was there leaving from that week for the war. And there was this tent, the tent with the cross. That meant a lot to me. It
was amazing how that whole experience had such an impact on so many different people. Whether you were involved in the war, whether you were for the war or against the war, or whether you weren't even alive at the time of the war, it had such an emotional impact in so many different ways. I had the honor and the privilege of being able to see the actual Vietnam Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. on one of my trips back there. And it is obviously a very powerful and moving monument. But frankly, it had more power to me here in my own backyard than it did in Washington, D.C. For two reasons. I was sharing it with my friends and neighbors, and then it was in an environment that I was used to looking at, Riverside Park, and to bring that type of expression of again, respect for those that did give their lives for our country just had a tremendous impact on many of us.
And we're, as this vet was just leaving for there, they'd introduced themselves to the new county commissioner. And he had said to them, he said, while he's gone, do you have a support group? And I thought, isn't that terrific?
Yep.
So Katie, if you're watching today, we are here for you, and all it takes is a phone call. We need to remember Stephen Highland is a doctor over there, and Courier's written a big article about him, but he needs to know the support. I sent him flashlights. There's a business company here that makes flashlights no bigger than a battery and a bulb. And those mean a lot because they even have infrared so that they're not seen. What can we do for our community? That's the big question. You've been asked it. You're in the Chamber of Commerce now, I understand.
The bank's a member, and I've been a member through the bank for a number of times. You know, it amazes me. That is, I think, a good question to always ask. But also what amazes me is how supportive this community has been in so many different ways. The Vietnam Memorial Wall is another classic example. We were able to provide some financial support to make sure that there were the resources, financial resources, to be able to bring it. But the number of not just veterans groups that were volunteering out there, but the number of other private individuals that had no tie to the military that were part of it, all the way from electricians to people who would just help lift the wall up and take it off the truck and have it set up, to motorcycle groups that came in and provided security. And that is manifested in so many different things. I get back, like, for example, on the Imagination Village we had. Let me give you a story of directly tied to the bank. We had an elderly customer that came in, and she had a jar of pennies. And she was there with her daughter, and they had, I can't remember the exact amount, but it was like $43 worth of pennies. She had saved those pennies, and she brought them in and donated them to us to help for the maintenance and to help pay for part of the cost of the village.
Oh.
And those type of stories just happen again and again and again in 100 different ways.
Well, I take a group of young people to visit the nursing home, to sing, to give a little worship service, and at Spring Village we've done a number of years, and took those kids there. And there was a vet without legs.
Wow.
Who his wife said, "I'd like you to talk to him." And so the kids got to meet someone.
Yeah.
And we got to say thank you to him.
Oh,
and
that's
I
great.
sure appreciate for the chance to bring us together. Isn't that what it's all about?
It is. You know, I've always believed that a strong community is a community that has people who have had shared positive experiences.
And even over a negative experience like war.
Even over a negative experience like Vietnam, which was so emotional for so many people.
Thanks for being
Oh,
my
you bet.
guest.
Thanks very much.
Which hand?
This hand is, either one is okay. They both work.
They sure do. Thank you for tuning in, and it's been my pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Bring Brady back and just share your story and our story. And
Great.
thanks for tuning in to Journeys and Journals.